You think you know chaos. You think you've seen wild nights, brawls outside clubs, drunks stumbling in the street, neon lights and pounding music. But trust me when I say this, your world of nightlife is a tame, domesticated animal compared to the beast that stalked the streets of Crusader cities after dark. What we call nightlife today, they would have laughed at. Medieval nightlife, especially in the Crusader states, was not just reckless fun. It was organized mayhem where every man carried weapons, every woman had a hidden agenda, and every dice game was a potential death sentence. The tavern was not simply a place to drink. It was a battlefield in disguise, a furnace where faith and violence melted together, a den where holy warriors laid down their vows and picked up their vices. And the truth is, everything Hollywood shows you about medieval drinking halls is sanitized fiction. Let me pull back the curtain and drag you into the choking smoke, the stink of sweat and wine, the clamor of dice on wooden tables, the hiss of whispered plots, the clashing of steel when a night of drinking snapped into a night of killing. Because this wasn't entertainment. This was survival mixed with sin, a ritual of chaos that could swallow a man whole. Step into one of these Crusader taverns. The door creaks open, and immediately the air hits you, thick and suffocating. The smell of sour ale, unwashed bodies, roasting meat, and spilled blood hangs like a storm cloud. Candles gutter in iron holders, shadows dancing across stone walls, streaked black with soot. The noise is a deafening storm, men roaring with laughter, slamming fists on tables, shouting insults, the rattle of dice cups, the sharp crack of tankards colliding, and beneath it all, the tense hum of men who have spent their lives in battle and know how quickly laughter can shift to violence. You don't see drunks stumbling with sloppy grins. You see hard-eyed killers swaying slightly, but still gripping their knives. You see mercenaries with scars down their faces, hands twitching towards hilts, even in the middle of a joke. Every man here has killed before, and every man here will kill again, maybe tonight. These weren't university students or 9-to-5 workers letting off steam. These were warriors who carried death in their belts, and they drank not to relax, but to blur the line between life and the afterlife, between faith and damnation. At the low end of this ecosystem, you had alehouses, tiny wooden hovels, dimly lit, where poor foot soldiers gathered over sour beer. They were packed shoulder to shoulder, every jostle a potential spark. Disputes over whose turn it was who spilled a drink or who insulted someone's home village were enough to draw blood. But this was nothing compared to the upscale taverns, the wine houses where knights and mercenary captains gathered. Here the wine flowed, imported from vineyards across the Mediterranean, richer, stronger, intoxicating. And here, money changed everything. Wealth attracted danger. More coin on the table, the more tempers flared, the more blades flashed. Gambling wasn't entertainment. It was obsession. Dice clattered, coins slid across tables, whole fortunes were lost in seconds. Hazard, the infamous dice game said to have been invented during the siege of an Assyrian castle, spread like wildfire. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't skill. It was pure chance, pure adrenaline. Imagine hardened knights, men who had stormed city walls and ridden through showers of arrows, trembling with excitement as dice rolled, begging the gods for luck. Archaeologists have uncovered dice and gaming boards in castles, monasteries, even Templar strongholds, proving that gambling reached from the lowest peasant to the highest monk. Men sworn to poverty, the warrior monks of Christ, were secretly rolling dice, burning through their stipends, and sometimes even gambling away weapons and armor. Think about that, knights entrusted with defending Jerusalem, pawning their swords for one more throw of the dice. And when money vanished, so did patience. A knight who had lost too much, too fast, didn't storm off in frustration. He reached for his dagger. That's the terrifying reality. Modern bar fights end with black eyes. Medieval tavern fights ended with funerals. Every crusader carried steel. Not decorative, not symbolic. Daggers, arming swords, maces. These weren't tucked away. They were drawn in a heartbeat. Picture it. Two men at a table, dice tumbling, one laughing as he scoops up coins, the other red with rage. The loser flips the table. Coins scatter, drinks spill, men shout. Chairs scrape back, knives flash. And then the screaming starts. Not a scuffle, not shoving. Blades cutting through flesh, blood splattering across walls. A dozen men suddenly involved because violence was contagious. These weren't isolated incidents. Chronicles are full of reports of alcohol-fueled bloodbaths. Paris, 1288, the tavern of Saint-Envie erupted after an argument between a pimp and a client. By the time it ended, the entire tavern was in chaos. Dozens fighting not out of loyalty, but because in that world, violence was entertainment. Recreational warfare. Ordinary men joined just for the thrill of spilling blood. And the Crusader states in the Holy Land? Even worse. In Europe, kings and councils at least pretended to restrict weapons in towns. In the Crusader East, no one even tried. These were frontier societies where everyone was armed all the time. Swords and knives were as common as shoes. Every tavern was a powder keg where mercenaries, displaced nobles, and peasants trained in militia service drank side by side, each man certain of his ability to kill. Taverns became recruitment centers not for armies of faith, but for armies of vice, gambling, drinking, prostitution. Gambling so intense that chroniclers complained knights skipped their duties, neglected patrols, and even lost their armor on bets. Drinking so constant that men lived in a haze because water was unsafe and alcohol was the default. And prostitution so brazen that even Muslim chroniclers, writing with disgust, told stories of Crusader brothels openly operating in holy cities. Usama ibn Munchid, a diplomat who visited Crusader states, recorded scandalous stories of Frankish prostitutes, laughing at the hypocrisy of men who claimed to fight for Christ while buying pleasure in the streets. In Constantinople, Crusaders stopped on their way east and poured into brothel districts near the Forum of Constantine, condemning sin one moment and indulging the next. In Jaffa, one sultan outright refused a truce, citing Frankish taverns where Muslim women were forced into sex work. These weren't side stories. These taverns had reputations that spread across cultures. Jews in Egypt complained about locals frequenting Frankish taverns of bad repute, proving their infamy stretched far beyond the walls of Crusader cities. The hypocrisy was staggering. These were supposed to be holy warriors, men of God. Yet church authorities issued ban after ban against gambling, drinking, and tavern-going, precisely because they knew the truth. Crusader taverns devoured faith faster than any Muslim army. And still, the bans failed. Nothing could keep Crusaders out of bars. Nothing could stop the dice from rolling. Nothing could stop the knives from flashing. Picture Hugh of Jaffa in 1134. Condemned for rebellion, sentenced to exile, he should have left the Holy Land. Instead, he lingered, lured by wine and dice in Jerusalem. One day he sat at a gambling table on the street of the Furriers, drunk, oblivious, coins clinking, dice tumbling. A Breton knight approached, drew his sword, and stabbed him to death in full daylight, in full view of the crowd, right there at the table. A noble executed in the street over a game of dice. And nobody was surprised. That's the level of violence we're talking about. A man of rank could be murdered mid-game, and the world just shrugged. Think about this. When you go to a bar fight today, worst-case scenario? A few punches, maybe the police come. In Crusader taverns, the police didn't come. The authorities didn't step in. Violence was part of the experience. Chroniclers describe skulls smashed, men disemboweled, brawls spilling into streets where torches lit scenes of carnage. Archaeologists have found skeletons bearing knife wounds so severe that forensic experts struggle to imagine how the victims survived long enough to receive multiple strikes. Because survival wasn't expected. These weren't drunken mishaps. These were executions disguised as tavern fights. Every step into a Crusader tavern was a gamble, not just of money, but of life. And yet, despite the risk, men kept coming back. Because in a world where tomorrow was never guaranteed, where battles, disease, and famine stalked every horizon, the rush of rolling dice, the thrill of forbidden pleasures, the intoxicating blur of wine and steel was irresistible. It was adrenaline. It was defiance. It was staring death in the face and laughing. The tavern was the Crusaders' real battlefield. And make no mistake, your wildest night out, the neon lights, the pounding music, the shouting and shoving, is nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the crucible of chaos that was a Crusader tavern. They didn't just drink. They gambled away their souls. They didn't just brawl. They murdered each other in public. They didn't just sin. They turned nightlife into an extension of war. And once you've seen that reality, once you've heard the dice clatter and the knives draw, you'll never look at modern nightlife the same way again.